Thank you and welcome to First Parish Billerica. Thank you for joining us this morning and choosing to be with us in community. My name is Stephanie Trudel. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the lay minister at First Church Leominster. It is an honor to be here today with my Billerica friends. I look forward to coming and being with you once a month. It is such a highlight. Today's service will be talking about equity versus equality. What's the difference? Why does it matter? And, a brief nod to Martin Luther King Jr. If anyone is looking for something non-inauguration to do tomorrow, I'm part of the Montachusett Martin Luther King Jr. Coalition in my hometown, and we are putting on our yearly event where we honor Dr. King and his legacy. We will be discussing diversity, equity, and inclusion, why it is so important, especially in the face of the pushback we are seeing. That is tomorrow morning, and if you would like to come talk to me after the service. Our opening words today come to us from Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf, an amazing human being that I had the honor of taking a pastoral class with. They write, "This is a congregation that gathers in faith, not faith in one religion or one God or any one way. We gather in faith of the power of diversity, the power of love, and the hope of a world transformed by our care. We gather in faith in ourselves and those around us, not a faith that requires perfection or rightness in one another, rather a faith that in our shared imperfection, we may learn to stumble and fall together. Faith that we will help one another to rise and to try again and again. We are Unitarian Universalists." Now we will light our chalice, a symbol of our faith and our commitment to one another. Our chalice lighting today comes to us from Erica Hewitt, and it is entitled "Until All Means All." The chalice, as a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, arose as a beacon of hope in an atmosphere of tyranny. The chalice arose as a sign of promise that the marginalized would neither be forgotten nor ignored because they are beloved and precious from the perspective of the holy. This morning, we remember all of the people who have been told explicitly or implicitly through police violence, government policy, through derision or dehumanization, that they are anything less than whole, anything less than beloved. As we each light a chalice in our homes, in our churches, may we make our lives a beacon, a symbol of our promise to draw the circle wide, a sign that we will not rest until all means all. Please join me in saying the affirmation of faith of this congregation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Thank you, my friends. This is the time in the service where I share a story for all ages. So if you happen to be a child, the next part of this service is just for you. And if you are lucky enough to be a grown-up, that means that you were a child. So I invite you to allow your inner child to come out and enjoy a little story. I love sharing stories for all ages from this book after Aesop, Stories for All Ages. I highly recommend this book. This story is called "We Are Not Afraid." A long time ago, way before you were born, maybe about the time your parents were little kids, there was a special school called the Highlander Folk School. Highlander was in Tennessee, in the South. The whole school was nothing more than a few buildings set up on a beautiful hill, surrounded by green forests and farm fields. The people at Highlander believed that all people are equal, that all people should be allowed to go to school, and that the most important thing people need to learn is how to work together and love one another. Back then, believe it or not, African Americans and white people were not allowed to go to the same school, eat in the same cafeterias, or even get married to one another if they fell in love. But Miles Horton, the man who started the school, believed all of that was nonsense. He thought all kinds of people of all kinds of colors from all kinds of backgrounds should be able to work, play, and go to school together. A lot of famous people were students at Highlander, including Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. So although it was against the law back then for African Americans and white people to attend the same school, there were always people of all colors at Highlander, learning and playing together. One of the things they liked to do most at Highlander was to make music together. At one time, a whole big choir of African American kids visited from Atlanta, Georgia, and they stayed at Highlander. One night, all the kids were watching a movie in the main hall. The lights were out so everyone could see the movie better. All of a sudden, several big cars roared up to the school, and a lot of men with guns got out and barged inside. Nobody knew who the men were, but it was obvious they meant trouble. They were mad that African American kids and white kids were going to the same school. As these men stormed into the Highlander Folk School, somebody turned off the movie projector. The whole place went completely dark. The men with guns quickly realized they had made a big mistake. None of them had been inside the school, so none of them knew where the light switches were. And on top of that, they had forgotten to bring flashlights. So they roared and yelled at the kids to turn on the lights. None of the kids moved a muscle. Then, in the darkness, the kids began to sing. They sang a song called "We Shall Overcome," a very famous song often sung by people who believe that people of all colors can live together in harmony. The words go like this: "We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday." There are more words about walking hand in hand, being free, and being all together, the whole wide world around. In that scariest of all situations, those kids made up their own words too. To the men with guns, they sang, "We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Deep in my heart, I still believe we are not afraid today." This really startled those gun-toting men. The kids were supposed to be the scared ones, but now the grown-ups with weapons were starting to feel a little nervous. After some more fumbling around, they just gave up, ran back to their cars, and drove away. Those kids learned something very important that night. They learned how strong and brave they could be if they stuck together. And the words they made up that night have been a part of the song ever since. The end. Are the children staying, or what's the plan, Miss Lisa? We can still sing at them. You're going to go upstairs? All right. So it is the tradition of this church to sing out the children. So please join your voices together with me and sing the words found in our order of service. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. I'd like to invite Brita up to lead us for our uniquely Unitarian tradition of candles of joy and concern. We have our first reading. This reading comes from the book Exercising Preaching, Crafting Intellectually Honest Worship by Nathan C. Walker. It was perfect. What does justice making look like, feel like? What when we receive hostile communication? Are we hostile in return? Or is something else required of us? What we choose to do is a reflection of who we believe ourselves to be. It depends on what kind of power we value. I once believed it to be powerful to condemn wrongdoers. I believed it right to tear down another's unexamined assumptions and vaporize those whose presence was not worthy of my attention. I have spent far too much energy using the public forum as a battlefield. I have spent far too much energy using the public forum to annihilate those perceived to be my enemy. I believed that others were the cause of my aggression. Others were to blame for my feelings of despair, disappointment, and righteous indignation. I used to believe that being feared was powerful. I used to believe that it was my duty to free the oppressed, but when reacting with righteous anger, guess who becomes the oppressor? So, come lovers of justice and keepers of the dream. Come justified tyrants and suppressors of screams. You are all welcome here. None of us are exempt. We have all played the parts, the peacemaker, the warmonger. They live within. This is why we, as seekers of freedom, are required to make justice, not simply a product, but a process. Just actions are the means by which to achieve a just society. When we observe oppression, let us develop strategies that free not only the oppressed, but the oppressor. Let us remember that those who use their power to deny freedom to others are also imprisoned and are also worthy of care. Do not let their unjust actions inspire us to justify employing cruel means, or else we'll soon become what we set out against. The challenge is this. Let us take up the miseducation of justice making by stripping our conscience of images of equity that claim to manifest through condemnation, through humiliation, through shame and blame and righteous vindication. No, the craft of justice making begins by marrying a just thought with insightful words, inspiring us to collective action, daring to free both the oppressed and the oppressor, for we know what it's like to be both. Don't get me wrong. Stand we must. Stand strong and bold. But let us choose a new way to balance the scales rather than shoving our foot on the oppressor's neck. Let us instead reach out a hand, offer a gift, and show them, and even ourselves, a new way of justice making. Let us be in an attitude of prayer. I'd like to thank Sarah Eileen Lawal for these words. Spirit of life and love, in the silence, in the stillness, we hear the call of our own heart, its tender dreams, its sorrows and its triumphs. In the silence, in the stillness, we hear whispers of days gone by, of dreams still becoming, the promise of the future we celebrate together. our individual journeys and dreams, and our collective ones. Knowing the journey is so much richer with others to share in it. In the name of all that is holy, we pray. Amen, and blessed be. So before we get into today's sermon, I would like to thank you again for choosing to be in beloved community with us. Today's service is focused on the concepts of equity, equality, and justice. These are concepts that we as Unitarian Universalists ought to be semi-familiar with. The second of our 7 principles read as follows. We covenant to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Note that affirm and promote are very much verbs. It doesn't say we like the sound of that. The intention is to move us to action. I also appreciate the pairing of justice, equity, and compassion. For me, it is a holy trinity worthy of adoration. There are some today that would look at our principles and call them woke. This could be a compliment or not. These principles, first adopted in 1960 and later revised in 1984 and 1985, and then finally being revised just last year at General Assembly, are a source of wisdom and pride. I point this out not only to refute the idea that being woke is trendy, new, or a passing phase. The vernacular changes, but we Unitarian Universalists have long recognized the need for these values to be lived out loud. We now enumerate these principles in our stated values of justice and equity. This being the Sunday before Martin Luther King Jr. Day and on the precipice of a disastrous inauguration, we hear the word equity, we hear the word equality over and over again. An idea held up, bright and shiny to the light, the end goal in the fight against racism. I often hear equality and I don't see color in the same breath. I cannot help but shake my head. Navigating interactions when it seems like we are speaking different languages can be frustrating. There's some of that around equity and equality, and many use those almost interchangeably. And while they are 2 separate concepts, they work best when used together. Here's where I usually pull out my handy dandy dictionary and give a simple definition just to get us on the same page. Well, I must admit, Merriam-Webster let me down. This may be a first, but don't panic. I found some fantastic, really full definitions from Rise to Win. Rise to Win is a national nonprofit that educates and empowers the sports community to eliminate racial discrimination, champion social justice, and improve race relations. Through partnerships and programs, they inspire leaders in sports to create positive change on matters of race and equality. Equality is one of the central principles of democracy and is based on the belief that all people should have the same opportunities to be successful and have a productive, enjoyable life. I'm going to say that again because I think it's important. Equality is one of the central principles of democracy and is based on the belief that all people should have the same opportunities to be successful and have a productive, enjoyable life. Equality is rooted in fairness, since it is linked to another American ideal, that of meritocracy. The idea of equality is key to the notion that everyone will be able to achieve based on their efforts and contributions to society instead of their status or position. Equality was particularly important during the civil rights era, when non-whites didn't have an equal standing or treatment before the law. More recently, there has been debate about whether equality is enough and whether equity is a more important principle. Equity recognizes that everyone doesn't begin in the same place in society. Some people face adverse conditions and circumstances, making it more challenging with the same effort to achieve the same goals. Equity advocates for those who have been historically disadvantaged, making it difficult for them to be successful. What is fair as it relates to equity isn't a question of what is the same, but rather the point from which a person begins. Equity takes into account historical and other factors in determining what is fair. I quickly want to define meritocracy since I had to look it up myself. Meritocracy is a political philosophy. It is the notion of a political system in which economic goods or political power are vested in individual people based on ability and talent rather than wealth or social class. Advancement in such a system is based on performance as measured through examination or demonstrated achievement. I think now would be a good time to show you all this graphic that I found that illustrates the difference between equity and equality. Okay. So I'd like to give the example that everybody gets a pair of shoes, but they're the same size. That's equality. Everyone gets a pair of shoes in their size. That's equity. What are you noticing about this graphic? Mm-hmm.
Well, the little one couldn't see anything, and then when we switched it up, the same one is a bunch of ants.
Yes. So in the first part of the slide, that represents equality, where everyone is given the same thing to be fair, right? But it doesn't help the little one. It helps 2 out of the 3. That's less than helpful. But equity, it gives people what they need. The tall gentleman, the older person, doesn't need a box to stand on. So it can go to the smaller person so that they can see and they can fully participate. Fully participate. Does giving everyone the same help actually help? No, not always. What are the barriers to access that we come up against? Where do those with disabilities fit in? When barriers to access are removed, we all benefit. This leads me to another bit I'd like to bring into this. Intersectionality. I think, is that the next slide? Oh, okay. Let's talk about this for a second before we go on to intersectionality. So we have reality where some people have more than they could ever need, while others are below the starting line. That's how the world is today. That's how our country is. We're seeing it clear as day. Equality is where we give everybody the same thing. It does help some, it lifts some up, but there are still those who are not able to participate fully. Then we have equity, which gives people what they need to be successful. It understands where they are starting from. But then we have liberation, and that's the goal. Equity is not the goal. Equality is not the goal. Liberation, my friends, is the goal. Removing barriers to access so we can all participate fully. That's the goal. Intersectionality. Who's heard of that? Yes. Yes, please. Great. So intersectionality is best described by the brilliant minds at Stanford University. Intersectionality describes overlapping or interdependent systems of discrimination related to age, disabilities, ethnicity, gender, geographic location, sex, socioeconomic status, sexuality, and more. Researchers and engineers should not consider gender in isolation. Gender identities, norms, and relations shape and are shaped by other social attributes. In 1989, legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality to describe how multiple forms of discrimination, power, and privilege intersect in Black women's lives in ways that are erased when sexism and racism are treated separately. Since then, you really can't tease out if it's sexism or if it's racism. We saw that in this last election. What was it? Was it because she was Black? Was it because she was a woman? Is it both? Yeah. Since then, the term has been expanded to describe intersecting forms of oppression and inequality emerging from structural advantages and disadvantages that shape a person or group's experience and social opportunities. Axes of discrimination differ by culture, and these may include, these are all the axes: age or life stage, disabilities, educational background, ethnicity, family configuration, gender, geographic location, handedness, language, race, religious culture, sex, sexual orientation, social and economic status, and sustainability. If we understand intersectionality, we can understand how we must use equity as a means to get to equality. It appears to me that when we use the active application of equity to promote equality, all we have left to do is apply copious amounts of compassion. I cannot stress enough the importance of seeing one another as whole beings with inherent worth and dignity. That was our first principle. Although we have our new values statement and our flower, our principles are not gone. We still have them. Compassion comes in as seeing others as human, recognizing their unique needs and working to make it so. Collectively, we have more power than we believe, than we realize. And I believe that we Unitarian Universalists are uniquely suited to the task of justice making. That's what we're talking about, right? There is no shortage of injustices, inequities, and discrimination. The weight of this grows heavier every day. Let there not be a shortage of hope, of genuine care and compassion for each other. Let us know that all of our collective work is pulling at the threads of the tapestry of white supremacy, interwoven with patriarchy. We must keep at it. This is holy work of ours, and I say that with utter solemnity. We must continue to take forward steps to dismantle these systems of oppression, for it is our duty as Unitarian Universalists to do so. It is not enough to have discussions. Action is what we need. I encourage you to check out Standing Up for Racial Justice. It's an organization dedicated to providing white people a scaffold on which to build an anti-racist, justice, and equity-centered society. There are a multitude of ways to get directly involved in creating a more compassionate reality for all of us. We are all worthy of the effort. Thank you. I would like to say a word about fair, as I mentioned fairness a couple times. Life isn't fair. It's a familiar phrase, right? I disagree. That's overarching and overly simplistic and dismissive of further exploration of the subject at hand. Some things in life are not fair. Some things in life are fair, and some things in life must be made fair. The end. Thank you. Let us move into our reflection. This is entitled Loving the Ark, and it comes to us from Elizabeth Nguyen. God, who is with us in the courtrooms, at the border, in the streets, in the struggle. We do not know if this arc bends toward justice. The great test of our Unitarian Universalist faith is not whether we believe we can bend the arc, but how we are when the bending looks oh so differently from what we expected. When we're met with swear words when we expected songs. When we're met with a group of white people talking about white identity when we expected multiracial community. When we're met with a people of color space when we expected multiracial community. May we know the sacredness of people of color space, the holiness of white people supporting each other, and the power of cursing at injustice. when our efforts feel frustrating and hopeless, when we expected to see outcomes, when our people's bodies are dying in the streets and we have no idea how to be all right, when our people's spirits are dying from the grinding violence of white supremacy, when the era of Ferguson becomes an era of Baltimore, becomes the era of Charleston, and we don't know what is next. It may be Chicago. When we've been in this work for 6 years or 6 decades and we look around at our congregation, our local police, our schools, our prisons, and we have no idea what justice could look like. Our faith teaches us 2 truths: that we are always enough, and that the great circle of love casts no one out. That we are responsible for bending our small piece of the arc, for finding our own racial justice front lines. When we find our front lines, we find not only our hope, but we also find our most effective action. UU writer and theologian Kenny Wiley says in his Unitarian Universalist Black Lives Matter theology, right now, we are being called by our ancestors, by our principals, by young Black activists across the country to promote and affirm you who are young and Black, and your life matters just the same. You stole something and your life matters just the same. I have been taught to fear you and your life matters just the same. The police are releasing your criminal record and your life matters just the same. They are calling you a thug and your life matters just the same. There are no exceptions. Black Lives Matter is universalism in practice. May it be so. I will turn it over to Brita for the offertory. First Parish, Bill Ricca, is self-supporting and self-sustaining, and we ask that you give as generously as you are able so that we may continue the good work of this congregation. Today's benediction comes to us from Elena Westbrook. Go in hope, for the arc of the universe is long and we can bend it toward justice. Go in courage, for together we have the strength to confront injustice in our daily lives and the larger world. Go in love, because a holy and generous love is both the reason and the means by which we transform our lives. Our service together has ended. Our service to the world begins. Live long and prosper, my friends. Peace and long life. Our service has ended. Please join us for fellowship, and thank you for being in beloved community with me today.